Back in the Days by Addena Sumter-Freitag. This is a book of poetry, wonderful poetry. Addena, I'm not going to be able to do justice to her poems in the way that she does them, but I will do my best. I'll read 3 or 4. Addena's dad came from South Carolina. Her mom came from Nova Scotia. And Addena grew up in Winnipeg. That just sets you geographically. My daddy was a porter. My daddy was a porter. He was a young porter, and he was an old porter. After he retired at 65, he still worked. They used to call him a shoeshine boy, but he was a shoeshine man. When he worked on the railroad, he was gone most of the time. He'd do his regular run to Port Arthur, and then he'd deadhead to another town and pick up an extra run before coming home. The day he was due, I'd run up Mackenzie Street to meet him, every time. I'd know just when he'd be coming. A tiny dark dot would appear on the horizon, that's as far as my eye could see, and a rush of excitement would shoot right through me as he got bigger and bigger and turned into my dad. He was beautiful. He had on a two-tone gray porter suit with a peaked cap like a streetcar driver's hat and shiny black shoes. It made me feel all warm and glowy just to see him and be in his presence. He didn't say much. He hardly talked much. He'd just give me that look, take my hand, and we'd walk together in the sun down the gravel street, Mackenzie Street, smiling, me and my dad. Hey! Did I tell you he let me carry his porter bag the rest of the way home? Daddy, how come Mom sleeps with Uncle Bill when you're gone? Never you mind, honey. Just never you mind. The First Soldier. Mama told me about the soldiers in our family. The first soldier was my brother Horace. We called him Hory. Mom said her Ma, cried as she watched Hory go. Ma said, "Look at him go, my baby boy. Tall and proud. I hope that pride don't get him killed. The light in his eyes is as brilliant as the brass buttons on his uniform." Mom told me her brother Hory lied about his age and joined the army because he was afraid of our grandpa, Pa. You see, Mom said, he'd taken Pa's money, and he was supposed to go buy some stuff for the house, and instead he went and brought a chicken and some whiskey and went down to Johnny's house, and they had a flicky. All them young niggers would party at the drop of a hat, you know, buy some meat or steal a few chickens and cook up a pot of stew, bring out some guitars, mouth organs, and spoons, and put out the word, "We're having a flicky," and they'd party all night long. Yeah, he joined the army rather than to face Pa. Just 16, a baby. Gone in the Army's construction company. That's what they had them black guys do. They built all the ditches and roads and shoveled the shit in the latrines during the war. Yep, my brother Hory, he was the first soldier in our family in the Great War, World War I. I keep reading the soldier poems for a minute. When the soldiers stayed with us. My mother's house was full of soldiers before and after the Korean War. We had them coming and going, my mother said. In our small 2-bedroom house, besides us, there would be as many as 12 extra people sleeping there at once sometimes. Eating, too. Soldiers were sleeping on the hide-a-bed couch, plus we had roll-away cots pulled into the living room, the kitchen, and the back porch. Once the house was full, we lost the only sitting space we had left, because Mom would bed down soldiers in the front sun porch. She'd put them on a Chesterfield out there and pull a roll-away in too. If push came to shove, and it did, one extra soldier wound up sleeping in the big armchair out there. They arrived in Winnipeg and found their way to the Colored Baptist Church, like their people back home had told them to. They asked colored folks to put them up till they got their orders as to where, when, and how the military was going to transport them to overseas to Korea. They came here from all over the eastern parts of Canada. Lots of them were down-homers, my mom said. That meant they were from Nova Scotia, where my mom's originally from. Some of them turned out to be relatives of ours, distant, close, and we even found one second double cousin. I know they wished they could have spent their last shore days sprawled out in some nice fancy place, but they couldn't. In those days, they couldn't get rooms in hotels. Hotels in Winnipeg didn't rent rooms to coloreds or Indians. The fact that some of them were 5th and 6th generation Canadians and that they were all going to fight a war for their country didn't mean nothing much to hotel owners. A soldier's dreams. I remember how handsome my cousin Alvin was in his uniform. He just beamed. That's the only word for it. It wasn't just a gleaming smile. His face glowed, I swear, like an angel's. His hair was cut and he was styling. He was real young. I think he lied about his age to get in the army, 'cause Rudy and DeLacy, those were my cousins, and Paul, his brother, they were going. And Alvin always wanted to be just like Paul, so they were all going together. They were coming through Winnipeg on the trains on their way to wherever they would ship off to Korea from. God, we were all so proud of them. They came to the Baptist church and got fussed over big time. Then they had a dance and a party and got much pussy, they said. I didn't know what it meant then, but I do now. And they got it because they were soldiers, and they were fighting at war for us. And this war would make things different, they said. Something happened to them over there. It must have been awful, because it didn't seem that long since we saw them. Oh, wow, it was too amazing. Rudy was a zombie, and DeLacy was a ghost, and Alvin had rotten teeth. Paul was an old man and crazy, like scary crazy. They said he was shell-shocked. I wasn't sure what that meant, but it made him mean, real mean. He went home and married Elise. She was just a real young girl. She had no parents. Elise was smitten by that old worn-out uniform and a few words of love, and they got married. He beat her all the time and dragged her around by the hair and burned her with cigarettes. Then he'd pass out and have those terrible nightmares about the war and wake up screaming and sweating, and Elise would hold him and rock him in her arms, and they'd cry together. He'd bring over old drunks, sleep with her, and beat her if she didn't, 'cause he owed them money, and they kept him in booze 'cause he didn't work. Couldn't get a job. Nothing changed since the war, except them. Yeah. They say Paul was crazy since the war, and they say Alvin was just like Paul. Back in the days. Friday night, all of us met up, and we'd be styling, fixing to dance the Madison and jive like there was no tomorrow. Back in the days when a bitch was a dog and nigger was a fighting word. And all the Canadian guys would stand around and posture and toss a dance challenge to the American GIs who came to town to take all their girls. Not that they wanted us black girls before the American guys came on the scene. Back in the days when a bitch was a dog and nigger was a fighting word. One night, some white guys surrounded Bunny Lane outside. I think they figured they could take on this slightly built little black guy. They sure didn't like black guys, 'cause these days they took all the girls and won every dance contest. No problem. Back in the days when a bitch was a dog and a nigger was a fighting word. Well, Bunny didn't run. He didn't cower, and he didn't say a word. He just backed up carefully and turned in a circle slowly to survey how many of the guys surrounding him were going to fight him. Then he took off his shoes. He took off his socks. box and crouched in a kung fu tiger pose, and gestured with a few short, "Come on, bring it on" motions, and all those guys took off like flies. God, I wish you could have been there. We had so much fun. Back in the days when a bitch was a dog, a nigger with a fight word. I think that's a good place to end.